Our opponent previews continue for the Indiana State football season. It will be October 27th when Indiana State makes the trip to Youngstown, Ohio, and we'll get to see a familiar face around these parts and a familiar voice in the Valley as well. And Bob Hannon, the voice of the Youngstown State Penguins, he joins us to talk about some pre-camp storylines for Youngstown State. Bob, I know last year 6-5 record, I'm sure, is not what Youngstown fans wanted, but at the same time, that record could have been significantly inflated due to how close you were in 4 of those 5 losses.
No, you're right. You look at the overtime loss at home to North Dakota State where we led in the fourth quarter, lose by 3 to South Dakota. I guess the game that still has us scratching our head is not that Illinois State's not capable of beating us, but on homecoming they beat us here 35-0. So it was a season that one more win likely would have got us to the playoffs. We were in every one of those losses except one. I think the big challenge is, how do we replace Hunter Wells? Even though he was hurt last year, he's a 4-year starter quarterback, and I think that's probably the biggest question coming into camp next week.
You mentioned, and look, the quarterback position, of course, is always going to get looked at regardless of the offensive system a team really runs. You mentioned Hunter Wells being gone, Ricky Davis as well, who I know filled in against us and ran for some yards. Nathan Mays is back. How is that quarterback competition, that quarterback group kind of outlook heading into this camp, and kind of what you expect or maybe what you're intrigued by and want to find out when you get there?
Well, I think the intriguing piece is that there's no question Nathan Mays would be the starter if we had to play a game next week. He has the experience. He's a good runner. He's a little bit hesitant throwing the football. He'd prefer to run than pass, and that's not what you want out of your quarterback. We do have a graduate transfer from Notre Dame, Montgomery Van Gorder, who sat 4 years at Notre Dame and wanted a chance to play right away. And with Coach Pelini have a relationship with Brian Kelly, he decided to come here. So I think how that unfolds at quarterback, I think Van Gorder's a better passer. Obviously, Nate Mays has the experience and is a better runner. We'll see how that unfolds. I think probably the first month we'll see both, and by the time we open league play at Western Illinois, Coach Pelini hopes to have one quarterback who's taken hold of that job.
How much at ease does it have at least Youngstown State fans knowing Tevin McCaster is going to be back?
Well, huge. He's a really good football player, and he was a walk-on. He was mostly getting Division II scholarship opportunities, decided to cross the state line from Western Pennsylvania to here. We think he's as good as any back in the league and potentially as good as any in the country. So whomever plays quarterback, it'll be good to have Tevin and some experience on the offensive line with Arankowitz returning and Gavin Wiggins. So I think running the football will certainly be something that we'll lean on once we get into league play. McCaster, we've had a tradition of great running backs, and he's certainly going to be among the best all time by the time he's done at the end of this season.
A year ago too, we mentioned those close losses, how that record really could have been flip-flopped, and you're in the playoffs, and who knows what type of success could have came your way. It wasn't that long ago too, in the national title game as well against James Madison. What is that locker room like right now in Youngstown in terms of the internal belief and the confidence of how good this team can be knowing they were so close a year ago?
I think that's a really good question. I think there's, in a positive way, a bit of a chip on the shoulder that we underachieved last year, and I think the players feel that way, that this needs to be a season of redemption and be a playoff team. Winning the league title is certainly something that's always a goal, but we know the challenge there because the league's so good. So I think really the goal is get to the postseason as we did 2 years ago. We got a break being in the opposite bracket from North Dakota State, made it to the championship game. But I think we're good enough. I think not only McCaster, experience on the offensive line, defensively, I think, Armand Delavade, a linebacker, a 4-year starter, Johnson Louis Jean up front with Savon Smith are 2 really good defensive linemen. We do have some holes to fill in the secondary, and both our specialists are back. So I think the talent is certainly there. I feel a little bit that we lacked leadership last year in that locker room, and I think that Coach Pelini feels he has some players now that this summer have taken on that role of leadership, and these guys have worked really hard to be the kind of team that needs to get 7, 8, or 9 wins to get back to the playoffs.
You touched up on it a little bit, some of those pieces of the defense you like. This was a defensive unit last year that was number 2 in terms of scoring defense in the Valley. I know they had the number 1 passing defense as well. You mentioned there are going to be holes to fill on the back end, but the grand scheme of things, does it seem like that stockpile is stocked with some pretty good talent on the defensive side?
It is, especially up front with Smith and Johnson Louis Jean and Delavade, a 4-year starter at linebacker. I like our corners. I really think that Bryce Gibson, who will now be a junior who started as a true freshman, can be an all-conference type player. I think on the other side, DJ Small. The one piece that we've lacked, and not only under Coach Pelini but prior Coach Wolford, if you look statistically, we've been near the bottom for most of those years in creating turnovers. For whatever reason, we're not getting to the quarterback and causing turnovers. We're not getting interceptions. So I guess some of that might be luck, but some of it's also by making plays on your defense. And we have not created turnovers, although statistically we've been among the best. We've not come up with the big plays and turn the field around. So I think that's something that has to change this year. But I do think the talent's there. I know a lot of people are worried about the secondary. I think it'll be better. I think Kyle Hedges is safety. Has a lot of experience. So I think even though we're losing some in the secondary, I think there are enough good athletes that, and with Bo Pelini's expertise being on defense, our defense will be fine.
Good news is he's got some time. I'm sure Coach Pelini, if he talked to you today, he'd probably be like, I wish we maybe had another month, to prepare before the season gets rocking and rolling. But fall camp will begin for the Penguins August 2nd. Bob Hannon will be there. And, of course, we'll catch up with Bob later on in the year when the Indiana State Sycamores and Youngstown State Penguins square off on October 27th in Youngstown, Ohio. Bob, I know that's a ways away, but I'm looking forward to it to make my trip out to Youngstown. We really appreciate the time.
We have a lot of good pizza here, and when you come to town, let me know. We'll hook you up with a couple of the better pizza places in town. How's that?
Sounds great.